Hey, Sarah, you know spring begins this week.
Yup. Is your wardrobe ready?
Diddy bread, you know it is. I have short khaki shorts, pastel polos, and most importantly, Sperry's. Sperry's is seafaring clothing, accessories, and shoes that are essential accompaniments for your adventurous lifestyle. To buy some of those little mugs, visit Sperry.com.
Awesome. Welcome to Splain Yourself, everybody, the podcast that gives regular people a chance to explain their actions or beliefs. I'm Sarah, baking up that Diddy bread.
And as always, I'm Michael, the muscle hamster. Today on Splain Yourself, we have our favorite regular guest, Josh Newer. Josh, welcome back, homie.
Hey, guys. Good to be back. I like
Yes.
that favorite. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Josh, we've asked you back to continue our discussion of discipline, specifically making it to the finish line of the goals you set for yourself. You have a very literal example of this to share with us today.
I do. So I ran a half marathon, and it was my third half marathon. You guys were really pumped about that.
We
were.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, so that's my third one. And I guess you guys wanted to talk a little bit about what that was like and the concept of making it to the finish line.
Sure.
Definitely.
When we last left you, you had just begun training, so we wanted to sort of pick it up from there. You had just sort of started your plan, so why don't you pick up the narrative from that point? You began training, and then boom.
I began training, and then boom. Yeah, it's a slow process. It's gradual. It takes time. And I basically start by signing up. Once I sign up, I have a goal. It's matched with a deadline of when that race is going to be. Race day, I got to clear that day. And then I come up with a grid. I go online and make something digital that's going to have weekly increments of what my goal is to run that week, how many times I run, and then I'll have a little box of what I actually do. And it keeps me on point, and it goes on the fridge. And after I do a run, I come back and pick up a pen and paper, and I write down what I've done, and I usually reflect back each week on how I did. And that's kind of the process that I do. And when I go running, I usually listen to music or podcasts. I've done something very different for this third half marathon than I had for 1 and 2. So that'll be cool to talk about.
Okay, and then when was the actual race?
I'm drawing a blank now, but it was in February. I think it was the last week of February.
So
about a month ago now.
The last week of February, and a half marathon is 13.1 miles.
That's right.
Very good. And so, you get to race day. Take us through the experience. How are we feeling? What's it like while we're running?
So there's a little apprehension about race day for me. Parking, getting up that morning and making sure I have everything intact. So the day before, I try to get everything I can from the race bib, which will have my name and number on there, and it has a chip in there that'll keep track of my time. Make sure I have my clothes ready to go. A lot of preparation. I'm also making sure I'm not eating anything crazy the night before. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to eat the morning of. So once I get there and we start, I feel a lot better. But like as far as, you get a little nervous, and when you get nervous, your body acts a little different. You got to make sure your pre-bathroom piece is intact and all that too.
Yeah.
And before you hit 13.1, you want to make sure you're feeling ready.
Light,
yeah.
So how long does that take, 13.1? I mean, on average.
You talking about the bathroom piece?
No, I'm trying to figure out, would I even make it without having to go to the bathroom? How do you last that long? Because how long does it take usually to run the whole thing?
How long does it take to run? Well, it depends on the person.
Sure.
I think I came in 975th place.
Nice.
There you go.
I feel really good about that.
There you go.
It was the slowest of my 3 marathons. I did things really differently. So for this one, you're talking about, for the first time I did it, I had little to no expectations. I still have a hard time considering myself a runner.
Right.
Sarah and I have talked about this, where it's like, my wife was a runner, and I thought about the idea of running, and I hate running. So it's kind of funny how it happened.
I feel you there.
Yeah, I don't like it. I like being mindful and walking and talking.
Sure.
But
not feeling like you're about to die. Yeah.
Yeah. So how it happened was I became very competitive with my friend, and he and I decided to sign up for a race together when he was going to come into town to Greenville.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, we signed up for a race that was about 4.9 miles. And so he'd send me a text, and I'd send him a text, and he lives up in the state of Pennsylvania. So my buddy Chris, let's see, you might get my boy Josh up
Yeah, there
here.
you go.
He
There we
strikes
go.
again.
So he's out $20. He's competing with you again.
Yes,
Think
yes.
When will he learn?
Yeah, I think he cut his losses after a while.
right.
Yes. So I can be. This is it kind of goes into that maximizer, but basically we were texting back and he had run 2 miles and I ran 3 for the first time in my life. 3 miles. Woo! Yeah.
Yay. Wow,
And
that's
then
a milestone.
He ran 4 and then I ran 5. I was listening to like a Christmas Carol
Oh, nice.
narrative, which
Yeah.
is the funniest thing to run to. And I'm going, and I'm just, because it takes my mind off of it. I can't think mile, and I was running in a loop, which is not good for Josh either. Now I love going out long distance and come
there you
back.
go.
Right.
So I did 5 miles, and then he did 6, and I said, that's it, this ends now.
Oh, wow.
And I went out and I ran 10. So I went from 5 to 10, and I went to the store and I got myself a gallon of chocolate milk and a loaf of bread, and then I had massive diarrhea. And
That was during the run or after?
After at home. And then while I was soaking in the tub with some Epsom salts, I reached over to my phone and I, in a frail way, texted my buddy, 10 miles, game over,
gosh.
send. And I might have drowned for a little bit in the tub, or not, I don't know.
The competition.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
which is 33 out of 34 in my strength. So it's very targeted with him.
Sure.
In this thing. So once I did the 10 miles, I came home and I surprised myself. I said, well, gosh, if I could do 10, I could do 13.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm just not the type of person. I'm not gonna be top 3. I'm not gonna be top 10. I'm not gonna be top 100. And the older I get, the better chances I have with my age bracket. I kind of like those odds.
Yeah,
there you go.
they
There you
keep
go.
shrinking, right?
There you go.
That's right. So I signed up for the half marathon, and my wife was like, "You're crazy. What do you? Okay." And so she'd run 3 before, and I was like, "Yeah, I kind of like the sense of endurance. You start a race, and you listen to podcasts and music, and you take your time and look around, and they give you free drinks from time to time. You paid for it, but they feel free."
Right.
So the first time I ran, I didn't have a lot of expectations. I got there, and I was like, whoa, this is cool. There's a lot of people here. Look at this. Ooh, it's early. Okay. It rained a little bit. But it was an amazing sense of accomplishment when I got there. My daughter and my wife were there. I picked her up at the finish line and almost fell over.
Aww.
And now I have it on a mug, that picture.
Aww.
So that was really cool, and I just absolutely surprised myself through that process. I was confident that I'd be able to do it once I started it. And so I just needed to sign up and start it. It was kind of how that worked. For the second one, I had a lot more expectations going in, and I wanted to beat my time. I'd use the app, Map My Run. We could put them on the next week's
There you go.
sponsor.
That's right.
They got to come up with some money.
That's right.
Those
That's right.
endorsements aren't free.
That's right. Take that, Map My Run.
That's right.
Pay up. So I said, it would tell me my mileage, it would tell me my average pace, all that stuff. And I wanted to beat my time. I think it was like 10 minutes behind it, but I felt really good. And then for the third one, I did things so differently. I cut coffee, so I had no caffeine that morning.
Wow.
No, I had green tea, but not the caffeine of a coffee.
Right.
And I ran with no app telling me what my time was, which is so incredibly different. And I want to say freeing. So it depends on who you talk to about that, but I mean, every mile it's telling you your average pace, and you know where you stand. And so, I just try to be at about 9 minutes, that consecutively. That was my goal. And that's how I had a really good time. So this race was like 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes longer than my first and second per se. But I felt like I really paced myself. I felt really good. Plus, I have a 6-month-old baby, so training was altogether different with this.
Yeah.
It was a lot harder to get out and do that kind of mileage.
Absolutely. So you raise a number of interesting points. First, which I think this is a bigger discussion, you don't see yourself as a runner. At the same time, 3 half marathons is probably more than 98% of the population. And you spend a lot of time running, but you're not a runner.
Yeah.
I think there are 2 sides to this. I hear a lot of people claiming to be things.
Right.
Right? But then they do it very infrequently, or they do it frequently and they stink.
Right.
Right? And then I have trouble seeing those people as that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like, it would be like me calling myself a philosopher. Except for, I mean, I have thoughts on philosophy, but there's
Right.
no to it. So, when do you become a runner?
It's a great question. Well, I'm about 3 years in now, is what I'd say. And the first year was actually the first year at Next. I was pretty stressed. I was the founding counselor and the only counselor, and the needs were outrageous. And that's where I took up running. And then we had the challenges I mentioned, and I scaled it to 10. But it really was a lot of taking care of myself. It was a lot of stress management. That was my healthy outlet, was running.
Sure.
And I figured it was a fad, it was a phase. And then the next year, I wanted to do it again.
And did you run sort of consistently in between the half marathons?
Yes, until summer. I despise running in the heat.
Yeah.
I'd rather do just about anything, exercise-wise, than I'll do burpees. I'll do whatever you got me to do. But, running consistently long distance in the heat, I think is brutal. Some people love it. It's not for me.
Right.
The winter's great. I'll take it.
Did you ever do like treadmill running or anything like that?
Treadmill is very difficult for me, and most people who I would consider runners, my wife included, I consider her a true runner. She's been running her whole life. And I'll define what I think that term is. But no, treadmill is really hard for me. I can zone out on like a TV show, but it just feels so mechanical.
Yes.
So fixed. So a runner to me is somebody who they own the clothes, they know the lingo, they've run a lot of their life, they have likely a typical build. Now all these things are my assumptions coming in.
Sure.
Like I said, I'm new to the game. So if I go to buy shoes, I'm used to like basketball shoes.
Yeah.
I'm used
Those are
to-
terrible for running.
Yeah, or just something altogether, something very casual. So, they'll tell me about my feet, and they'll tell me about my gait, and all the runner talk. And so this is kind of cool, because I used to go out in my runs, and I'd get passed by people, and I'd be like, man. And then I'd see them, 2 miles later coming back. And that's when I started to realize this is a kind of endurance running. No, it's not an ultra. But that person just ran 2 miles, and they ran it faster than me. But I'm running 10 or 13 that day. I started to feel really good about it. It was like a big self-esteem boost. It was something I didn't think I was capable of, and I sort of overcame that. And through that, I started to realize a lot about myself concerning self-discipline, perseverance, accountability, knowing myself and my brain and the way my brain works, the things I can talk myself into and out of, paying attention to the urge that I have to quit at times, replacing some habits, some bad habits with good habits. And I would say one of the most important things, if you want to talk about it, that I learned through all this is knowing my limitations.
But you learned all of these positive things from running. I would think you would want to make that part of your identity. Father, drum player, rock and roll dude, counselor, and runner.
You guys are so good to me. Every time we talk. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I think knowing your limitations and knowing your limits is so incredibly important. I'm cautioned when I'm with people who talk a big game and they don't talk about their limits. I think that's like self-discovery and personal growth requires you knowing your limitations. It allows you to say no to certain things, to say yes to other things, and that's how I was able to do it. I mean, I had to sacrifice time to train for these races. And in saying no to certain things, and even having conversations with my wife and saying, this is something that's very important to me. How can you help me with this? How can you support me in this? And it inspires her to get back to running. And so she says, I really want to run with you. I want to run a half marathon with you, she says. So I said, okay, awesome. Let's look at now. Her adaptability is going to look very different. She doesn't work off of my weekly, months in advance goal setting to run. But she respects it. She sees it as something that gets me to where I need to be.
Sure.
To successfully finish that race. If I don't know my limits, I take on too much. I can resent something or I can quit it. And I think knowing my limits gives me the boundaries, and knowing where those boundary lines are gives me freedom to say yes. And also I go on these runs and I'm uninterrupted. It's amazing. I mean, I can listen through a podcast. I can sit through music. I can be very mindful. Whereas I might not have gotten out. We leave, and during the winter, for example, it gets dark very early. On a Saturday, I can get out there and I can maximize my daylight. I can get out there, and I'm not so sure I'm a runner because I've not joined any running groups. So what's very unique about my story is I run these 3 half marathons, and all 3 of the training for each of the 3, I just go out and run on my own. I've never been a part of a running group, which people tell me is crazy. But
Crazy in a good way or crazy in a bad?
Crazy in a, how do you get out and go, and where's your accountability, and I'm around people all day, every day. And I work in such a person-centered industry that when I go out, it's kind of nice. I'm still around people. They're passing. Yeah. They'll give me a thumbs up or a wave. I say hello. But it kind of feels nice just to be able to get out and clear my mind and have some me time. That's some me time.
Sure. Along this line of questioning, running is notoriously boring. And I have run in the past. But this is not something I could ever do for my long-term sustainable exercise. I find it very boring. How do you get past pulling a Michael and stopping?
Yeah,
wanting to stop.
That would also be called pulling a Sarah.
Oh, man, look at you guys. Yeah. So you mean specifically to
I'm on the treadmill and I realize I'm going to have to be on this mug for an hour, right? And then at minute 18, I'm like, woo, this is boring.
Yeah.
I would much rather be playing video games.
Yeah, and I would have a hard time encouraging you to get back on the treadmill to do that again now if it's snowing outside or if it's hailing. Maybe it's good to get on the treadmill. But I'd say, why don't you set a goal to go somewhere you enjoy being anyway? So maybe it's a park. Maybe it's a trail that you enjoy.
Sure.
And if it's a place you frequent already or you enjoy being there, you can set yourself a little distance goal. And the app's kind of nice because then you don't have to pay attention to anything. It'll literally remind you when you've finished a mile, 2 or 3.
Right.
So I think turning off your mind is so important. So a lot of people are like, wow, how do you do 13 miles? Do you just got to all right, that's it, I'm going to do it? And you just go, no, it's the opposite for me. I have to turn my mind off and allow myself to be entertained by everything else around me. And I become very mindful. It's a slow process. It's the analogy. Mm-hmm. Although it's not a marathon, it's a half marathon, but it's not a sprint. And so a lot of people will burn out early in their runs. And so this time in particular, I really paced myself. And I also think, if you enjoy listening to a podcast, if that's something you enjoy, like the Splain Yourself podcast,
that's right.
Download yourself a Splain Yourself podcast and go for your first run, and we can talk about these things. Michael, you suggested I listen to a podcast that talked about running, and
yes,
and it was a pretty extreme case, but that's like I used to work out watching The Biggest Loser, and I was super motivated by watching all these people do something with so much intensity. It sure beats being at the gym and looking at the Food Network.
Yeah, right. The opposite is not good. Yeah. So what Josh is referring to is there's a recent episode of Joe Rogan's podcast where he interviews a man named David Goggins, who is was he a Marine,
Navy SEAL,
and just has an incredible story about all the physical accomplishments this guy has been able to do. It's just solely based on will. Like he holds the record for most chin-ups in the 24-hour period. Mm-hmm. Which was like 7,000 that he did in sets of 5 or something ridiculous. Mm. And this guy is sort of the ultimate spokesman for your mind can teach you to overcome anything. So if you need some motivation while you're trying to run a half marathon, like that's the best source I could ever recommend is that guy, because he is certainly the most iron-willed person I've ever heard talk.
Yeah, you're basically listening to somebody tell you you can do it, you can overcome over and over again. And that sort of motivation was very encouraging for me to continue moving forward. And I did use the bathroom that day, just number one, since we got all weird talking about bathroom stuff. But and I hadn't done that in the first 2. So that was kind of weird.
Like really a break cool. in your marathon to go pee. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you got to go.
Well, I got there, and then there was somebody in there, and I was waiting, and then some guy showed up just before me, and he gave me this look like I got it first, and I was like, well, forget this.
Yeah.
Now I'm just chewing up time. So the next time, because, anytime there's Gatorade, I take it. I took a lot. I'll tell you, I because I didn't have the coffee this time, if they had anything, I took it. And so I had the chia seed and all this different things to fuel you. And it really messed with my stomach. I'm pretty disappointed. Yeah. So this is something, this is the learner. I really need to learn from other, like I say, runners. My first 2, I felt great. Afterwards, I went to the finish line, and I'm eating their oranges. I'm eating a piece of pizza, their water. They got it. I paid for it. I'm eating it and drinking it.
Sure.
And then this time, I finished the finish line, and my wife's like, man, let's go see what they got. And I'm like, I need to go home right now because my stomach's wrecked.
Oh, man.
So from talking with people, they said that sort of comes with, taking on some of those pieces that will help fuel you during your race. And I'm like, hey, that's not worth it.
No.
So I want to find an alternative. I like the idea of running another half next year, and I officially will have run more half marathons than my wife. So
nice.
My 33 out of 34 competition with Strengths Finder says, man, but that's my wife.
That's right.
I can do this. So it's pretty cool.
Competition when it's kind of more personal.
It's got to be personal. Yeah, with the people I put in that category for later, people I feel close with.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, so let me ask about this because I'm not a runner and I don't ever really want to be one, but I have, health goals, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I know that running's good for you. So if I am not interested in let me do a marathon, but I want to go from 0 running to some running, how did you become a runner initially? I mean, you said you were you were replacing bad habits, or you were dealing with stress in that way.
Yeah, I think what I'm about to say, I think probably carries over to many things. Mm-hmm. But I think for me there was a threshold. I had to get past a certain piece.
Yeah.
So when I ran 3 miles, I was surprised myself, which now sounds so little, but at the time wasn't.
That's huge for me. No, I can't even really do a mile straight without having to stop. So yeah. And
then when I ran 5, I was just like, wow, 5 miles, this is unbelievable. And then when I ran 10, it really, you realize how low your ceiling actually is, and you realize what you're capable of.
Sure.
And so I would say, and this is all, like I said, my buddy Chris up in Pennsylvania, I mean, we were talking daily about this. And you got to have somebody in with you.
Yeah.
So while I didn't have my running group, everything got filtered through him. He and I are talking on race morning.
Yeah.
3 years consecutively before I run my race. So you have to have somebody, I think, that's in your corner and supporting you and giving you the encouragement that you need to do it.
Sure.
And it's kind of an odd thing. I feel like I didn't ask to be a runner. I didn't really want to be a runner. So I totally identify and empathize with what you're saying.
Right.
And I think that's why I don't want to associate myself with being a quote-unquote runner, because it sort of becomes this elitist.
It kind of
is. Can be.
Like this other culture.
You either are or you're not.
Right.
And it's like, well, I don't know, man. I think you enjoy getting out into nature, and you do it a little faster than those that are walking.
There you go. Yeah, and I kind of look at it like I want to be able to do that, because it seems like such a basic human thing to just be able to run. And I did it when I was a kid with no problems whatsoever, right? I could run all day, but you get to this point where you're just you're feeling like less of a human being because you can't do these very basic physical things. So I don't want to join the running culture, but I do, I just want to be able to say, I can run a mile, I can run 3 miles, shouldn't everyone be able to do that, right? Yeah.
No, I think for me it was a threshold, and it was getting to beyond where I thought I was capable of very quickly. I also had very low expectations. I think when your expectations are low, you exceed them quickly, and then you just grow. Just go to the next step.
I'm awesome at having low expectations for myself. So
and
this is sounding promising.
Well, I'd recognize when I had an urge to stop.
There you go.
And I was listening to a podcast. It's about procrastination, and he talked acceptance and commitment therapy, and this whole piece of recognizing not as much labeling it as a feeling. I have an urge to stop right now.
Yeah.
And then I'd look ahead, and I'd see a tree out in the distance, or I'd see some sort of landmark, and I'd say, I'm going to run to that.
Yeah.
And by doing that, I'd extend or I'm going to go, I already know now, I've done it enough times to know where 2 miles, 4 miles, et cetera is. I'm just going to go to that thing or that place. And that was part of it. My buddy Chris up in Pennsylvania, he'd tell me that his group, he'd give me some tips from his running group.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of bipartisan guy. But he'd say, every once in a while when you're about to stop, push it and run faster. And that will just sort of do some things.
That's just good discipline training. I feel like that could spill over into other areas where you're I've gone this long without having a piece of chocolate cake. I can go another, couple days. Yeah, that's cool.
Now, I'll also say I'm going back to knowing my limits. if I didn't feel well, so I'd go out there. I was very discouraged when I went out there sometime. I had a really bad headache, and I was really frustrated. I got like a mile out. I had everything prepped, and I was ready to run 10 miles, and I turned back, and I felt defeated, and that was like a really cruddy day for me. But I had to buy new shoes at one point because they were worn, and those things might sound dumb, but I was like 3 weeks out from a race, and we had to go spend a lot of money on shoes. Those are limits,
Yeah.
I don't. So the concept of I'm going to push myself, I'm going to go to the next level.
Right.
Sometimes I'm cautioned by that talk because
Right.
maybe there's a smarter way. Maybe there's a way that involves wisdom that will help you get there safer.
That's a good point because you don't want to.
You don't overextend.
Overdo it. Absolutely.
Sure. I mean, I have a billion more questions for you.
We got a little bit of time.
We do? Good.
Yeah.
So now that you have completed this, what's next?
Oh, boy. You asked me that last time, and you left me with a zinger, man. And I was like, gosh, what is next? It's funny. It's so interesting. Like I've been playing drums for, I don't even know, maybe 20 years now, and I don't always think of myself as a drummer. So when people be like, man, you're a drummer and you're really good, and I'm like, wow, yeah, it's funny. I don't even associate that with my identity, and that's probably the healthiest thing. And there's things I shouldn't do that with. But running is one of those things. And so when you're like, what's next? I'm like, well, running wise, it's about to get hot. So I'm about to not run.
There you go.
But I do have a bike, and I really enjoy riding. But as far as goal setting goes, I don't know if I've ever done, apart from my reading goals, I set a goal to read.
Right.
You guys know about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very similar, I'll tell you real quickly, very similar to my running. I one day wanted to know how many books I'd read in my life, so I wrote down every single book I'd ever read. And I wanted to see if it was as many years as I was alive, and it was less, and I was very disappointed. That was after grad school, which was sad to me. But I was really good at starting a book and then starting another one and getting really interested in the third.
Yeah.
And then a friend gave me a fourth. So I'd have like 4 books on a nightstand, and then altogether would just not read any of them.
Right.
And so I started, for me, the key was writing things down. Once I had a pen and paper and I went back after I read something, I'd write the book. And I read, I was reading, about 3 books a month and read, I think, over 60 books in 2 years.
That's awesome.
It's just crazy. Like, basically, that it's crazy. Now I'm like up to 110, where I was at like, I don't even know, maybe 20, 27.
There you go.
So it feels really good. I love progress, and I have a developer part of myself who loves being a part of other people's progress, and the maximizer in me loves my own personal growth and the progress within myself, and I like overcoming. But I have to keep saying, with that, knowing my limits has been the key to doing that well. What's next for me? I do have something. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm doing it right now. Shoot. So I have friends. My friends Jody and Paul. Do you guys ever get shout-outs? Can I do that in this?
Do a
You
shout-out.
can always do shout-outs.
Shout out to Jody and Paul. So they do this thing called Brightline, and there's a PhD behind it, and she has done a lot of research, and it's quite compelling. It looks different. It looks like a regimen of eating that's not quite as fattish as most diets, and it looks like it's set for a lifestyle, which scares me. But like, you do this the rest of your life, and you become the 1/100th of the 1% that keeps weight off for over a decade. And that's scary. And I go to eating disorder trainings, and that scares the heck out of me. So I have both ends of the spectrums, and I think somewhere in the middle, I realize, gosh, there's sugar in everything in my house, and I'm sick of it. Even the organic stuff and even the natural stuff, and it bothers me. Like, I feel like I'm kind of duped. Like, I bought you because you said you were healthy, and you have just as much sugar as the next product.
Yep.
And so some of that education has been helping me realize, like, okay, that's just not good for me. And in a conversation we had where I came up to you and I said, gosh, I'm so tired. And you said, you have 6 pieces of bread in your day, and you're not even done yet.
Yeah, Josh's position was, hey, I eat peanut butter and jelly. I can't imagine why my body doesn't process this well. I was like, Josh, where's the nutrients? And he was like, hey, I got bread. And I was like, no.
It's whole grain, Michael.
Yeah, that's what he said. That's actually
Yeah.
what he said. Yeah, but it's wheat.
Yeah.
And I was like, cool. And then he was like, well, jelly. And I was like, there's no nutrients in jelly, Josh. It's just sugar.
Yeah, it is pretty much just sugar.
It's funny how what I'm about to tell you parallels the running. So this idea of Brightline, and they sent a book to my house. Now Jody has developer, and they both have input. They love to learn information. And so with having her developer, she's like, hey, I really wanted to read the book Bright Lines. And so she had it sent to our house for me to read, and then for her to, when we're done, I can give it to her. And now that I'm reading books, I'll actually read it. I'm 10 pages in. And basically, it tells me what I can have for a breakfast. There's a weight loss phase, and then there's a maintenance phase, and then there's another phase. And right now I'm in the weight loss phase because I'm heading into spring break, and that's my little short-term goal.
Trying to get that bod.
That's
and then
right.
I'm going to go into summer, and I'm going to maintain this thing. And I did what I do. I made it digital. So I created a template.
Yeah.
And it has my weekly Monday through Friday, my breakfast, and I can circle what I want. And that's what I'm doing. Now, what I'm not doing is I'm not weighing my food. I go to these trainings, and they talk about the importance of watching yourself with your diets around your kids. And so I don't want to be weighing my food and getting extreme in front of my 5-year-old, soon to be 2 weeks out from
Sure.
5-year-old daughter. And I don't want her to be at her age on a diet or thinking that she needs to lose weight or get a certain number of steps.
Yes.
Right.
And I'm modeling this for her. So, or I'm saying, oh, I can't have that. It has too much this. I can't have that. So I'm watching my language with that. But I have this piece here, and their idea is, eating to lose, is eating food that, you get really full on their meals. But so basically I started one day on it, and that morning I would have had a biscuit that a group of people I meet with would have had, and I didn't have that biscuit with egg and cheese on it, but it sure would have been good.
Yeah.
Yum.
And then later on I went to that training, and they had Panera bagels.
Which you also don't need.
But I would have hit it hard. And then at lunch, so I realized, I told my wife, and I went home, I was like, gosh, it's funny, because if I wasn't eating this way, I would have already just naturally had a free biscuit, because, hey, there it is.
A bagel.
And then a free bagel.
Yeah.
And then before I knew it, I come home, and somebody might say, hey, you know what, I'm tired. Why don't we just get a pizza?
Yeah.
And that's not even trying. I'm not even trying to have carbs.
Right.
Yeah.
So these things have been interesting. We went out for ice cream last night, and that was... I don't want to be weird, and that's the other side of it. Like, there's your limits, okay? So I don't want to... I tell people all the time, you might strive for restoration, you might strive for completion, but don't strive for perfection. And so that's something I'm keeping myself, knowing my limits. I don't want to be afraid to mess up, so here's some ice cream. My aunt comes and she wants to make some meatballs at our house. Make some meatballs.
There you go.
I don't want to be culturally difficult to be with either.
Right.
That's considerate.
Yeah.
Nothing like someone on a diet who's letting everyone know
Right,
they're
because
on a
then
diet.
essentially you're making... There's plenty of people who do this, by the way, that your diet is everybody else's problem.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is narcissism at its highest...
Yes.
It's narcissism filtered through health, which is sort of its most insidious form.
You're disguising it a little bit.
That's really good. That's something I really liked from Jody and Paul about their idea of that particular regimen that they did that worked for them based on the research they did.
Sure.
It wasn't pushy, and that's where I said, I think I want to try this. And isn't that kind of how it works?
Absolutely.
When you talk about what works for you and what you enjoy without pushing it. So I don't know. I think with running, like a lot of things, just try it, have fun with it. You're gonna have to write something down at some point, and you're gonna have to try to reach toward that piece. And I think once you go beyond that threshold, it's something to celebrate.
Yeah. That's good advice. Anybody thinking about starting running out there, this is good stuff. Tell us your prop, and then we gotta probably peace out.
Great. So this is my. I'm gonna make some noise in the
That's
mic.
right.
Yeah.
This is my half marathon medal, and the first one I ran, they had this clay piece, and it wasn't a medal, and I was really disappointed
boo.
because I'm always afraid it's gonna break, and then I have nothing to show.
Sure.
But yeah, this is a really cool medal, and it says half marathon 2018, and I love it. So I keep it in my office as a means of inspiration and motivation when I'm meeting with clients or students or staff, and I say, hey, listen, I am one of the most unlikely people I can imagine that would complete something like this. And if I can do this, I know it's cliche, but why not try and see what you're capable of? Why not try and see what you can do?
That's right.
So that's just kind of been my, that's a lot of the podcast Michael had recommended to me was I love these stories of people who are able to do something.
Yes.
Beyond, bigger than themselves.
Absolutely.
Which I want to give the props to Jody and Paul, to Chris, to my wife, to all these people, to you when you check in, say, how's the running going?
That's
Michael,
right.
How's the running going?
Yeah.
This encouragement and the support of the people around me makes it bigger than myself.
Absolutely.
So it's not the Josh game. You guys really helped me do that, so thank you.
Oh, hey, I'm glad to do it, as long as you're returning the favor, which you do. That's one of your strengths.
Thank you.
Well, this was really motivating and inspiring. Thank you again for coming and sharing your story with us, Josh. We hope to have you on again soon.
This was awesome. Thanks so much. Let's do it.
Yes, sir. All right. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter at Splain_yourself for updates and other content. We'll be back soon with another episode, but in the meantime, keep reaching for the stars and always be ready to splain yourself.